Episode of DCU Daily. Today we're talking about John Cena and Peacemaker. Of course, John Cena made a lot of headlines and definitely, made a lot of people happy or not, depending on, how you look at it. When he showed up at the Oscars with his whole bit, if you saw the thumbnail, you already know what I'm talking about. If you didn't see the show, then go check it out. I'm sure that clip is around on YouTube. So we're gonna focus on Peacemaker, of course, and there's more than a few scenes in the first season where John Cena's not wearing a whole hell of a lot. So if you are a fan of the show, then I'm sure you have a lot to look forward to, because the new season, as we now know, James Gunn has confirmed that is going to start filming this year. We're not going to have to wait till 2025 for it to go into production. Initially, we thought that he was going to finish working on Superman Legacy, or as we now know, just Superman, and then he was going to start working on Peacemaker. That was the implied message, but it seems like now both projects will be in production simultaneously. That comes from the man himself, James Gunn. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what that means for Peacemaker, and of course, his canonicity, if that's a word, to the DCU and then the DCEU and all that jazz. Because clearly, this is the second season, not the first of the show. Maybe they'll call it like Peacemaker Reborn or Peacemaker Rises Again or something like that. We'll talk about it. So to do that and so much more, as always, of course, I've got with me John. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. This is definitely, kind of interesting news. I finally finished up the first season a couple of weeks ago. It was fine, but it's kind of funny how that, turned out. But yeah, so Jennifer Holland posted, I think on Instagram, that Peacemaker season 2 is going to start filming this summer, and James Gunn is kind of go back to back with directing. However, he did say that it's mostly going to be other directors while he is going to be focusing on Superman, obviously, because that's the bigger, project. But yeah, so filming, that's definitely, kind of spinning. I think a lot of people were wondering in terms of Peacemaker, because it's kind of like a bit of a weird thing, because it was kind of like an intermediary kind of like it's kind of an anomaly, I guess, because it was the DCEU. They were going to get a season 2, and then it got rebooted, and now, since it was a James Gunn project, now it's going to get rebooted like in its own weird way. But yeah, James Gunn did confirm again that yes, Peacemaker season 1 is not going to be canon, just that some threads are going to be, no pun intended, are going to carry over. We got to wait how they're going to, address them, whether that be like through like a Deadpool meta thing, where it's like, oh, you probably remember this from season 1, but that's not that thing anymore, which I wouldn't be surprised if they did, considering how fucking popular Deadpool is right now, with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out this year. Yeah, I was like, is it this year or next year? It's this year. And so, I wouldn't be shocked if they did that, or they did something like just totally just like do like ignore it and then be like, oh, this is something totally new, or even like do like really bad like Family Guy cutaways, be like, oh, like that time we did this, and it's like it was like a season 1 event, but it's like slightly changed because it's a new canon. So yeah, we'll see how that turns out, I guess. But yeah, so obviously season 1, again, saying that it's not going to be canon. But he also stated a whole mess of other shit that was new to us, which was Peacemaker is going to be taking place after the events of Superman, not Legacy. And that's definitely interesting, because I would have assumed, since they're filming at the same time, that it would be like coming out at like maybe a little bit earlier, since it is a smaller knit TV show and not like this big thing. So it probably doesn't need as much post production like Superman does. But hey, it seems like we're going to have, with this season, they're like, okay, we're going to go full in on the DCU. We're going to have, like he said, that the events of Superman is going to affect Peacemaker and all that jazz. So that's going to certainly be interesting. If I were to guess a release date, since Superman Not Legacy is coming out in July of next year, it's probably going to be coming out in the fall, because that's usually, more often than not, the go-to in terms of like that's usually when the quote unquote TV season starts, even though it's kind of I know it starts either in September or like February, March. In terms of like, because I know there's like the big like mid-season break, and then it comes back, and that's also when like new shows that are smaller also start up. So it could be either or. I could see it coming out in fall 2025 or in like early like
Yeah.
winter into spring 2026. So that'll certainly be interesting. And I like how that they are going to be, having that affected. Like as I said, like it was definitely an interesting take to have it actually affect this Superman is going to affect the events of Peacemaker, because if I were to take a guess on, where James Gunn is feeling, I've mentioned many different theories on how Superman is going to tackle this, new continuity. They'll either uh have it be like in a positive way or a negative way. I would assume negative, since Peacemaker kind of rides the line of villain and anti-hero. So if I were to guess, I would say that like going off of my theory and what James Gunn's inspirations were, and what with the cast we've gotten, with all the notes, all this shit. So I'm suggesting, like, for my theory, that Superman is going to come out further into the limelight. He's going to be a known hero. He's going to be a Metropolis hero. He's going to come out further into the limelight and show these heroes, these really brutal heroes, that's going to either be like a proto authority, Stormwatch kind of, or just kind of willy nilly with all these like more brutal heroes. Superman's going to be like, hey, don't be edgy assholes. Be nice and kind, because that's fucking awesome. It's great to be optimistic and kind and passionate, guys. So I feel like with that big thing for Superman, there's going to be like a turn where superheroes are going to go down the line of like more like hopeful and all this shit. And then you have like stuff like the Authority, which is going to hold on to those more like darker ideals of like, like kill, be brutal, be an asshole, that type of thing, because
Yeah,
even
peace
if they're
peace at
not,
any cost.
yeah, like they're, like the Authority, as we know that they're not antagonists, they're protagonists, they are good guys. It's just they don't give a fuck. Same with Peacemaker. I will kill as many men, women, and children as I can to, get peace. But with how season one ended, he's kind of, on that line. And I feel like they'll continue that aspect, because James Gunn said, even though it's not canon, he'll continue some threads into season two. So I'd imagine that instead of this could be a good theory, instead of the events of season one as we see them be for Peacemaker becoming more of an anti-hero rather than a straight up villain, then I can imagine that instead of season one like being a good guy, stopping Project Butterfly, all this other shit, it's that Superman coming out into the limelight like, hey, be a better person. And even though Peacemaker's probably going to still hold on to those brutal tactics, gory, bloody, be kind of an asshole, he'll maybe, see like, okay, maybe I don't have to be a total asshole all the time, and maybe protect innocence and stuff like that. That I could also see happening. So that I think could be interesting. And I think that would be an interesting way to take it. Like, as we've said many times, have Superman really affect the events of the DCU proper. Why Superman, not Legacy, is going to be, the first movie, and have that affect everything from here on out into this new universe. I think that's a really, really cool way to do it. And I really like that. I really like,
Yeah.
if that is true. Obviously, it's just a theory, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so I'll put this up on screen. James Gunn really, coming from the man himself, I mentioned at the start. He saw this article on cosmicbook.news, which is a website that's, not not always the most reliable. They also usually put, because they might be pulling from a Reddit post or something or something like that. They're nonetheless, and he said like, yeah, the source might be iffy, but he basically then mentions that Superman and Peacemaker are going to be shooting simultaneously, and then therefore he's not going to be able to direct every episode. He's going to direct some of them. What and what that tells me is, of course, they clearly feel like James Gunn doesn't need to be there, or like James Gunn certainly feels like he doesn't need to be there to shepherd that project every step of the way. It's and I'm guessing, but it's an educated guess that they'll have a lot of the same crew behind the scenes from the first season. So the people working on the show, they know the character. Obviously, the actors, John Cena knows Peacemaker really well. So with that said, yeah, I mean they could be shooting on one soundstage for Superman, and then you can have Peacemaker shooting on another soundstage, either on the same lot or in a different city. What I do wonder though is he implies that there's going to be a lot of there's going to be connections between the two, and you mentioned that. But maybe what I'm wondering, I guess, is does that mean that shooting them simultaneously is because there's opportunities for crossovers? like like the event,
Possibly.
like the between the two. Because for example, the first season of Peacemaker picks up literally where the Suicide Squad leaves off, the one that James Gunn directed. And then over the course of it, we get hints at all the other many of the other Justice League members, like Batman. What do you say? Batman is a fascist or something? Oh no, that was from Blue Beetle.
That was Blue Beetle.
But there was
Yeah,
definitely a
no, but he
Batman
did go on
rescue.
that tirade with the neighbor where he's
Yes.
like, "Batman
Yeah.
imprisons criminals, and then they come out and
Yep.
kill more people. What kind of fucking justice is that?"
Yeah.
That kind of thing, you
Exactly.
know?
So I mean, but that could be
The
any Batman.
Batman hate
Yeah.
boner that everyone seems to be having nowadays because it's cool to hate Batman because didn't you know Batman does nothing for Gotham, and also all the Robins are child soldiers, and also he's the worst person ever, didn't you know? Like, I sorry, that's another rant for
Hey,
another
you're not
day.
getting any arguments from me. I my favorite comic book character of all time is Batman. So I
Yeah.
grew up on Batman. I'll always love Batman. I mean, speaking of which, if you watched the Oscars this past weekend, I loved the whole when Danny
Yeah,
DeVito
that
and
was a
Arnold
highlight.
Schwarzenegger come out, and then Michael Keaton sitting in the crowd with just a look on his face. He was like, and I'm like,
Yeah,
yes.
that was
Now
funny.
I want that movie. I want a Michael Keaton Batman to come back as the Batman,
I
and
mean,
and
we
then I
could have
want
gotten that, but WB was like, "Well, no, that's not gonna happen now because The Flash sucked. So, we're not getting Batman
dude,
Beyond with
but
Michael Keaton, and we're not getting Batgirl with Michael Keaton, so whoops."
well, yeah, I will. But I don't even care about that stuff at this point. I'm just like, I want Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I just need if that was a backdoor pilot. If Warner Brothers were somehow backdoor piloting, because it seems like at the Oscars this year, a lot of those presenters, they were there not only because they'd won in the past, but in some cases they were promoting their upcoming movies. That's strategic. Like studios, kind of work with the Academy to set that up. Like for example, I think it was not Kate, Ariana Grande, and I'm forgetting the name of the other actress. The two of them came out and presented some awards. They're in that new Wicked Bitch movie, right? So, I was like, well, I know that they were celebrating the anniversary of Twins, but
Yeah.
Michael Keaton's in the crowd. You got Penguin and Mr. Freeze. I'm like,
Eh.
come on. Like, why can't we get that movie? I would love to get that Batman movie. I think it would be fantastic. Um, Having said that, look, ultimately, Peacemaker season 2 is going to be interesting, right? Because when you think about it, it's the kind of show that fits very well with James Gunn's sensibilities. It's literally exactly what James Gunn, loves to do. It's the best of his sensibilities, and
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 that
it in a lot of ways
yeah.
clashed with what the DCEU had been because it was kind of all over the place. But now with this new universe, Peacemaker is already a fan favorite. It was the biggest show in the world when it came out. And even if they give it a different name and it's slightly different and it has a different intro, look, when John Cena's at the Oscars doing the kind of stuff that he pulled off, I'm like, the dude is comfortable just being himself and not taking himself too seriously, and it just goes down, as the perfect. I mean, speaking of what he was wearing, behind that envelope. um, it definitely lines up with, the Peacemaker, some of the scenes in Peacemaker that we have seen. So I'm excited to see, how they
Yeah,
continue to evolve and maybe take even more risks like what they did in the first season. Because let's just say there were a few moments in the first season of Peacemaker where I'm like, I did not think I would ever in my lifetime see a DC project go place these places.
yeah,
You know,
and it was also
even in a world where Deadpool exists, I did not think that's
yeah,
what I'd be
it was
getting.
also even
So,
funnier considering that, I think, Danielle Brooks was also nominated. I think she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
she was there. Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. She was in the crowd.
Peacemaker reunion at the Oscars, I guess. So that was kinda funny.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm curious. I feel like he's good. Like James Gunn, I feel like has two sides of respectability when it comes to comics, like more of the serious stuff in like Guardians and that kind of thing, and then poop and fart jokes and this type of shit, like the gross out stupidity. So I hope,
It's
like,
yes.
as a Superman fan, I hope he gets all of the dumb shit out while he's directing Peacemaker, and then we get the actually good, like, serious, like, this is what Superman should be
Right,
stuff
right.
in, in that. So let's, let's
I hear
hope
you
for
there. Yes.
like
No,
I like
yeah, absolutely.
as much as I like enjoy the funny James Gunn, I just don't want like Superman saying poop jokes. Like I don't want that. That was my biggest like sort of thing of like, oh please for the love. Like when he was announced, I'm like, oh come on, can we not do this? But luckily, I feel like hopefully he's gonna actually respect the source material and actually give us something
Yeah.
worthwhile.
No, and
So
look, this is something that a lot of people had concerns about, but it seems like, with there were parts of Peacemaker and certainly parts of the Suicide Squad where you could tell. And then when you look at the work he's done on Guardians of the Galaxy, the whole trilogy, we know that James Gunn can kind of, go in different directions from a creative standpoint. And he can kind of pull back a little bit and not necessarily, go down every dirty alley, if you know what I mean. So, one thing I wanted to ask about the cast.
yeah.
We had sort of been speculating, like, is Freddie Stroma coming back as Vigilante or not? It looks like Daniel Brooks, Jennifer Holland, Chukwudi Iwuji. I don't know if his character
No, he's
survived the
not
first
coming
season.
back.
He's not coming back.
Spoiler alert
Um,
for Peacemaker, that character died. So he's not coming back, but Steve Agee is coming back.
yeah,
He's also going to voice somebody on Creature
yes.
Commandos. I forget who it was, but one of them.
So so I mean, it looks like as much of the original cast as is possible based on the story is coming back. Which look, ultimately they could just say if it, I mean, if this it's weird because if season 2 is not canon to the or season 1 is not canon to the DCU, but season 2 is, they could just start fresh.
Yeah.
That's the part that's a little confusing to me even today. It's like I wonder like why they're bending over backwards to make it so that the season 2 is still consistent with the events of season 1, and yet season 2 is not part of the same continuity as season
I
1,
feel like
you
because
know?
like I think mainly because a lot of fans really loved the first season. They really loved Vigilante. They liked, Eagly. They liked the camaraderie. And they kind of want some of that to stay for the second season. So it's like, okay, then what's the point of watching the show then? Like that kind of thing. So I can kind of see that. Like, for instance, if the show like was complete shit and it was like nobody watched it, nobody liked it, then I could see them just going like, okay, so John Cena is going to stay the same, but new cast, new feel, new tone, new everything. I could see that. But the fact that a lot of people really like the first season, because I've seen people, friends of mine and fans are being like, well, okay, then if you're starting fresh, why is like season like what was the point of watching season one if it's just going to be rebooted again? So I feel like James Gunn's saying, hey, we're going to keep some aspects of season one. It's just going to be a different canon, but it's still going to kind of be sort of the same. So it's not like so it's not like totally useless. Like
I get that.
it's like
I
keeping the fans in mind, I guess.
it's I mean, fair
It's
enough, but,
even though it's
I
complicated.
right, exactly, there's 2 sides to that argument, like, you could say, "Yes, yes, I hear you there, but
It's
You know,
complicated.
like, but exactly, but like I guess like Marvel is in a similar situation with Daredevil and even I guess with Deadpool in a way, but the way they're going about with both of those situations with Daredevil, he was always supposed to sort of be part of the MCU, so they never did anything so out of the MCU's way in those in Netflix shows that you couldn't reconcile them, and so I guess they figured like we can always retcon certain elements, kind of like what they've been doing in some Star Trek series these days. But speaking of which, I recently just finished the last season of Picard, and I can tell you I had a pretty good cry watching the final episode of that season 3 of
Yeah.
Picard.
I've heard
That
that it
was
was actually good,
it was
unlike
yeah,
season
no,
1 and 2.
dude, like honestly, it's like yeah, Star Trek Picard, like season 3, they did that shit right. Like it's like especially for the original crew, like the original the Enterprise D, like it's yeah, very much like if you haven't been caught up, then you should go watch it. Now, getting back to Peacemaker, of course. Um, James Gunn also mentioned Waller is
Yeah.
coming after Peacemaker season 2, partly because of the strikes that kind of moved things back a little bit. And Jeremy Carver and I forget like Crystal, I forget her last name. She's like
Crystal
the two of
Henry, I
them,
think, believe. Yeah.
Crystal Henry, like they're the two writers, lead head writers on that show and executive producers, and they've been working hard on it. But and of course we've got Viola Davis back in the role of Waller, but it looks like we're not going to be getting that until after season 2 of Peacemaker, which now begs the question: when are we actually getting Peacemaker season 2 or the new Peacemaker or whatever, or the Peacemaker, I guess you can call it.
That would be
If
really funny if he did
right,
call it The Peacemaker
the
since he came on
Peacemaker,
for The Suicide Squad. That would be
right?
really funny. Or,
I would yes.
no, it would be even better, because of the whole licensing issue with Ghostbusters. They could call it
Yeah.
The Real Peacemaker. That would be, like, really funny. That would be really funny.
I would love that. I would so love that. I mean, look, it's it's not something that's would be, beyond James Gunn's sensibilities. So I definitely think that those are options on the table. I don't know if they've decided on one or the other, but I guess we'll find out. But just as a fan, I have a question about the timeline here. We
Mhm,
know that Creature Commandos is coming out this year at some point, most likely in the latter half of the year.
mhm.
And we know that James Gunn has clarified the events of Creature Commandos take place before the events of Superman.
Right,
Fair enough.
obviously.
It's an animated project and so on and so forth, but we know the universe doesn't really properly kick off till Superman, which I hope he stops saying that because it does feel like it's undercutting Creature Commandos. It's like, well, the universe doesn't really kick off till Superman,
I
and
guess,
that
like,
kinda
because
implies
movies
that
are
you don't
still
have to watch.
technically so much bigger than TV
I
shows, so
get
I guess
that,
that has
but at
something
the
to do
same
with it.
time, like, you don't wanna, like, drive an audience away from it just because you're saying, you could skip, but it implies that you can skip it, like, whereas the MCU, I think, has always had the strategy of you better watch everything now, and while that's to the
Which can
detriment, I
also
think
drive people away because 'cause they're like, "Well, I'm
it
not
can.
watching
Yes.
15 TV shows to watch a mediocre movie about how, 3 Captain Marvels try to defeat Discount Ronin." So it's like, "Alright, why the
Yeah,
fuck do I need to
yeah,
watch
which
all
is
this
fair.
shit?"
Completely fair. I mean, look, I get that. That's there's two sides to every coin, and I understand that that's not necessarily the only way to do things. I'm just like we get it, like, but you should be pumping up. Not that he hasn't
Yeah,
been pumping up Creature Commandos, but getting back to the whole timeline situation, we know
yeah.
Creature Commandos comes out this year. It's the first DCU playing anything, and it takes place before Superman. Then we know July of next year, Superman comes out. So now that we know that Peacemaker is going to be filming right alongside Superman, and James Gunn will probably even hop across a little bit, and there might be some actual crossing over between characters as well, between Superman and Peacemaker. We know that Peacemaker season 2 is now set to come out after Superman.
Mhm.
So and then Waller. So like, what are your thoughts on like when all these projects will actually land beyond Superman?
I think they'll really, like, really pump it out because he did say in the Threads post, if you bring it up, that Crystal Henry and Jeremy Carver are working, they're writing it, but he did say that the strikes did push some stuff back. So, so obviously, yeah, if you see, like, at the bottom, Jeremy and Crystal are hard at work writing the great stuff, and the schedule was impacted by the strikes. So I feel like if the strikes hadn't happened, we probably would have been getting a lot of this stuff sooner. Obviously, that's the obvious thing of, like, when it comes to strikes, but what I'm saying is, like, I feel like the timeline was definitely more affected than we thought, because it feels like we were supposed to get Waller, like, before Peacemaker, but now because of various things, okay, we have because of these strikes, even though the strikes could have gone on a lot longer, okay, we have to, like, really we have to, like, undercut this and do this and do this. So because of the writer's strike, I'm going to assume we were supposed to get Waller soon after Superman, or maybe even around the same time, um, rather than Peacemaker. So it looks like because of the writer's strike, because I think he pretty much had. I mean, the thing is, difference is James Gunn pretty much had like the entire outline of Peacemaker done, because he did say, I think a
Right.
couple weeks back, he just
Yeah.
finished writing the last episode of season 2. So I would imagine like he had the entire outline that was going to happen, but that was like, okay, that was going to happen eventually. But then with everything that went on, okay, let's fast track Peacemaker. And since Waller doesn't have that outline because James Gunn doesn't have, that's not his own personal thing. Peacemaker was his own personal like baby, I guess. So he's like, obviously Henry and Carver had to stop because of the strikes. So I feel like a lot of stuff had to be pushed around and pulled around and all that. I feel like Creature Commandos at the very most is probably going to come out in like December of 2024, because it's like, we swear we're going to, we're going to pump this out before then, but it's like you still got to do a lot of animation before then. So I'm really curious with how that's going to work out, even though I think it's probably going to be like 8 to 10 episodes, because that's what it usually is nowadays. Um but even then, it's still like a lot of stuff. I would imagine, as well as the fact to, give us something if Peacemaker doesn't come out till 2026. I would imagine that, oh, it's going to do what Invincible did, is, oh, you're going to get the first half now, and it's going to start in 2024 technically. He never said that the season was going to finish in 2024. Just say that Creature Commandos was going to
But dude,
start
but
in
that's just
24.
I don't like that. I don't know. Like, do
Which,
you think James? Because James Gunn
it's a
is
loophole, but it's technically right. It's a loophole, but it's technically right, because it's gonna. He said no matter what, it's gonna start in 2024. So I can see them doing like the first half of season 1 in 2024, and then because of animation takes a lot of fucking time. Good animation takes a lot of fucking time, and then they're gonna have to do the second half in 2025, maybe like right before Superman, to get people pumped up, I guess. But I could picture them doing that, because it's like, well, we're still technically meeting our deadline, but not the whole thing. So
yeah.
I don't
I
know.
just I just hope that it's we don't swing in the total opposite direction of Marvel is known for putting out these late announcements and dates and logos, and then religiously sticking to them sometimes at the expense of quality projects. And then on the side of DC, so far, what we have been seeing is they just don't announce the dates until they're ready. But I hope that doesn't, get to a point where we're now seeing things like be announced super super late, and then it's almost to the detriment of the projects because people are like,
Right.
wait, it's coming out now, like because you do need a certain level of awareness around these projects because you're trying to draw not just the hardcore audience but the general audience, and that's really what helped the MCU become how big as it was, how as big as it was. And the rejection by that larger mainstream audience is what killed the DCEU ultimately. So you know I think if the DCU can ultimately find a happy middle ground, that's what I would be hoping for.
Yeah. Um
So let me just to kind of like bring this whole conversation full circle. What are your expectations of season 2 of Peacemaker? Like, what do you think? Like, do you have any ideas for where they're going to be going with this? Like, because the season 1 is pretty much stands on its own by itself. Like, if that was all we ever got, then it ends on a pretty conclusive note. Like, they closed that chapter pretty conclusively. There's not much of a
yeah.
cliffhanger to work from. So where do you think they go next?
Um I feel like James Gunn has the idea of going bigger. Like, that's his thing. You got to go bigger. You got to go even bigger. You got to go even bigger. So I feel like he might do what he did for Guardians Volume 2, and like really like showcase the um relationship between Peacemaker and his father, because while yes, we did get some of that, I feel like
I was gonna say.
now that, as the kids would say, Augie is living rent free in his head, a little bit more so than that. But technically, now that he hears his voice in his head, like just like in the comics, he he'll probably have like sort of like like even more so, and that kind of follows with like James Gunn's trajectory, I guess. Like, okay, the second part of something, it's gonna focus on the main hero's father, because of course it will. um Action stars from the 80s and 90s, played by action stars from the 80s and 90s. But he but yeah, I feel like they'll focus on that. Maybe they'll do like sort of a law thing, like the team law in the comics, because they did, introduce Judo Master as well, and he was on that team. Even though I don't think the Christopher Smith version of Peacemaker was on that team, but that's beside the point. They might do something with that. They might, you know, just like further a lot of the stuff that that was going on in the first season. What I think would be really funny is if they make Vigilante make introduce Vigilante, like another version of Vigilante, and have that be like the comic accurate version, and like they'll like duke it out between like the funny version and then the actually serious comic accurate version. That could be pretty funny as well, because I know there's multiple versions of Vigilante in the comics,
I mean, maybe they'll
not just
bring the
talking about the original Greg
Arrowverse
Saunders
version.
version, but not the cowboy version,
Yeah.
even though he's fucking awesome. But that
I
would be
mean,
pretty
maybe
funny.
they'll bring like the Arrowverse version in, and then they'll like have a face off, like a meta face off between those two vigilantes.
That would be kind of funny. But yeah, I think they'll just like properly continue like some of the, team dynamics. Maybe, John Cena and Jennifer Holland's characters are, gonna have a wonderful love story. Maybe James Gunn has a cuck fetish. I don't know, but he wants them to, get together and have like a nice little romance,
I
and
like a
then
sequel to that Freedom scene where he's screaming "Frida" like in the first episode of the show.
sure, I guess. But yeah, and then like kind of continue on with those threads. Obviously, they'll probably go even bigger. I don't know if they'll stick with
Mhm.
like aliens like it did with the first season,
I mean, even
but
the
I
Suicide
think
Squad was like basically ultimately the villain was an alien.
yeah, so I
It
feel
seemed like
like
that thematically there was similarities between how the third act of the Suicide Squad plays out and the last few episodes of Peacemaker play out. So
instead of starfish, it's butterflies. But
right,
yeah, I feel
exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
they'll
yeah.
maybe go an even bigger alien invasion, um, or something like that. But I don't know. It's kind of up in the air, because it's like they're, a small knit like undercover team, so they might go something so bonkers. They might go something with like a little bit more grounded type of thing. But yeah, I think it would be kind of funny that if now that I'm thinking about it, now that I say all this out loud, it's kind of funny how Peacemaker did a better Secret Invasion than Marvel did, even though it's you could barely
That's
qualify
true.
it as Secret Invasion.
Like, it felt more like a body of the what's the body snatch the
Invasion of Body
sorry,
Snatchers.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It felt like a better version of like, imitation of that than Secret Invasion ever did,
Yeah,
which
because
I'm like,
Secret
"That's exactly
Invasion
what you needed to do." Like, that's
completely
literally
butchered that storyline. From what I've
oh
heard,
god, like,
like I watched
it's
bits and
also
pieces here and there, and I'm like,
dude,
this is bad.
having
Especially
seen
when the
it, I can
comics are so good. Yeah.
and having seen both the shows, I can tell you this much that, well, there's a general rule of thumb is like, you can shit the bed for the whole like runtime of a movie or TV show, but if you send the crowd home happy, they're gonna remember your, show or
Yeah.
movie for that. And I think like whereas Peacemaker like really nailed the ending, even the whole "fuck you Barry" part, which for all the not being a part of the DCU canon, it was definitely like it added to the whole ambiance of that whole final episode. Whereas Secret Invasion, like some of its most controversial and out there, stupid creative decisions came in in that last episode. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I 100% agree with you there.
Yeah. So, but yeah, but I think I would imagine that he goes bigger. I imagine that he, develops that relationship
I mean,
of
how much bigger do you
Augie
think they
and
can go with
Chris.
John Cena? Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's
And the team. I can't really say for sure because like, who would have
I think it's
expected
pretty
this from a
pretty big
Peacemaker show?
already.
Like,
So
who would have expected like a giant this thing from a Peacemaker show? So I could only imagine that like
it's still hard
how
to
they'll
explain
go.
that to somebody who hasn't seen the show, like what exactly they're looking at. Because this
Yeah.
looks like a mutated version of those little furry, like
Kirby's? Or not
or
Kirby's,
like from
Furbies or whatever the hell they're called.
from what was it? The Star Wars, the Last Jedi, the second movie, the Rian Johnson one,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, those yeah.
the little these look
The
that thing looks
yeah,
like it's a mutated version of that. Like you
yeah,
mutated and just like a Megazord version of that.
yeah,
um anyway. Well, I mean, okay, overall it looks like if season 1 is anything to go by, despite the fact that we're now in a new continuity, there are some characters will not be there, and then, some of the actors are coming not coming back, whereas it looks like the core Peacemaker team is. I'm looking forward to it. Like the best part of this whole, news cycle over the last week, where whether it was when Jennifer Holland mentioned it, when John Cena brought it up, and now of course, James Gunn kind of summarizing all the facts at hand, is the fact that we're going into production on this around the same time as Superman. Superman's already in production, which means for all we know, they might already have shot the first few frames and the first few scenes from Peacemaker season 2. So that's great news. We're gonna get it in 2025 at this point, right? So I'm looking forward to it. I have my expectations are pretty high because I definitely think that James Gunn, I think, did about as well as anybody could possibly have ever done with a character like Peacemaker, somebody that wasn't even on, 99% of people's radars before the
yeah,
Suicide Squad, and then all of a sudden to go from that to having your own show, to having that be the biggest show in the world when it was airing, to having a cult following now, to like, it's elevated John Cena's career. It probably helped elevate James Gunn into being the leader and creative voice behind the whole DCU. Like I think that helped him get that job, and now he's getting to do Superman, and then of course Peacemaker season 2. So I'm looking forward to it. I know you are. Anytime we get any updates, if there's set photos or anything like that, I'd love to talk about it. I'm sure we will talk about it
of
because
course.
season 1 was so creative and it mishmashed so many genres. I can only imagine the million directions. Oh, look, Christopher Hardall. He used to play all like the Wraith in the Stargate Atlantis. I love that actor. But there's a lot of like good nerd friendly content I'm sure coming our way with Peacemaker season 2. So John, as always, it's been fun talking about this. We can talk about this, probably forever because as we do with a lot of these DC topics, as fans, there's an infinite amount of theories we can dive into, predictions. We can analyze the heck out of it even more than we already have. But ultimately, the news is that Peacemaker season 2 is going into production pretty soon, if not already in production alongside Superman. James Gunn will be directing some of the episodes because, of course, he's got this big Superman movie he's directing at the same time. And it looks like Waller will also come our way at some point after Peacemaker season 2 airs. And Peacemaker season 2 might be airing not that long after Superman, which means that we are only about a year or so away from Peacemaker season 2. In the meantime, if you didn't have a chance to watch the Oscars, there's this really fun John Cena segment that I'm sure you will enjoy. So, if you're a fan of Peacemaker, then go check that out. And then, check out the Danny DeVito, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Keaton interaction because, I'd love to do a whole fan cast that movie. Like, imagine Batman returns again, and this time the Penguin comes back, and then you bring in Mr. Freeze and because Michael Keaton will tell you he's Batman, and I don't think anybody out there is willing to refute that statement. So, John, as always, it's been fun talking to you. Guys, go out there, watch something DC related. Come back and talk to us about it. We've got lots coming your way this week, as always. And if you have any ideas, anything that you want us to talk about, leave that in the comments down below. like and subscribe for more content like this. It helps us out with the algorithm gods. And until next time, we'll see you here on DCU Daily. And yeah, another fun day of talking about DC.